Welcome, everybody. We'll get started with the program today. My name's Kelly Rembert. I'm the outreach librarian here at the Southfield Library. And I'm very excited to be hosting this program with Rochelle Riley today. I've had the chance to see her speak before in person. I've got to read many of her books and her columns over the years, and it's always great to see you. So I want to give a little short introduction, is that Rochelle Riley is well known in Detroit here. She's been a columnist for many years. She has been inducted in the Michigan Journalist Hall of Fame and North Carolina Media and Journalism Hall of Fame. She's a co-founder of the Letters to Black Girls, and she's here today to talk about her latest book, which is called That They Lived, African Americans Who Changed the World. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Miss Riley.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. Thank you to you, and thank you to Eugenia, my friend and arts guru, who asked me to do this. And I'm always thrilled to do things at the Southfield Public Library, which is one of my favorite libraries in the world. I'm bringing my book to you. I guess it's been 2 years after I first did The Burden at the Southfield Public Library. So there is a theme, but this one is particularly, let me turn it this way, important to me because it's about educating our children and doing it in a way that ends the miseducation that happens that leads to racial disharmony. I think that if we literally taught our children all of the amazing things about all people and the accomplishments of people, regardless of their race, we would not have this sense of disconnect that we have in this country. So this book was written for two reasons. One is to teach every young person that every important person, every famous person was once a child. And the second thing is to teach adults the same lesson. So I want to tell you how it came about. In February of 2017, when I was working on The Burden, I happened to be on Twitter and saw these amazing photographs of this little girl, this 5-year-old girl, who literally not was just dressed as important African-American women, but embodied them in spirit. The makeup, the hair, just the whole works. I was just blown away by them. I enjoyed them. There was one every day that month, 28 days of them that February. And I thought they were great. And then I went back to working on The Burden. Well, a year later, February of 2018, The Burden was coming out and I was getting ready for a book tour, and I happened to be on Facebook and saw these photographs again. And it was the same stay-at-home mom outside of Seattle, Washington, who was posting a picture each day of her little girl as an important African-American woman in history. And they were breathtaking. And I could not ignore them. Well, I didn't ignore them before, but I couldn't move forward without finding out more about why she did this. So I reached out to her on Facebook and said, what you're doing is amazing. Talk to me about why you did it. And by the time she finished telling me, I said, each of these photographs deserves an amazing story to go with them. I'm a writer, and I would love to write an inspirational biographical essay to go with each one of them. And she said, oh no, I don't want to do anything like that. And I said, oh no, really, it's important. So I literally got on a plane, flew to Seattle, got in a car, drove to Kent, Washington, and met with Christy Smith Jones. And by the time I was finished taking her and her family to lunch and telling her about how I thought this could be a great project for not just young people, but for all people, she finally said yes. So I was thrilled, and I said, great, we've got 28 women that we can do. And then after that, I want us to do 28 men, and then we'll do scientists, and then we'll do business people, and then we'll do musicians, and then we'll do artists and sports stars. And she said, oh, no, wait a minute. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to do one book. And I went, oh, okay. Well, let me put the encyclopedia idea away, and let's talk about just that one book. Because we need to inspire our young men the same way, would you at least consider shooting photographs of a boy and men? And she said, well, I would do that, but we have to find a boy. And I said, I've got a boy. So I flew to Dallas, and I got my grandson, Caleb, and we flew to Seattle and drove to Kent, where she spent a weekend helping him to embody the spirit of Jackie Robinson and Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King. and Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington and Thurgood Marshall and W.E.B. Du Bois. And everything that she was able to do with Lola over weeks, she did with him amazingly in a weekend. And it happened in two ways. One, Caleb is pretty good at this, and I didn't know that. And two, we would shoot for a half an hour, and then he'd get to play Fortnite for 15 minutes. So there was some bribery involved. Um, but what we've come up with is something that we hope will literally make people stop and think about the decisions that they made and whether they're on the right path. But children who are 9 to 15 years old to think about where they are and what they're doing, and there might be some moment in their lives that will change their lives. So I want to tell you about a couple of them. And the way each is written, the very first opening paragraph is about what they were doing then. So Madam C.J. Walker, and I think that you've got a photograph of Madam C.J. Walker that we can show. What Christy did was chose an iconic photograph of the famous person, and then she photographed Lola that way. And for Madam C.J. Walker, her story, which is pretty well known, she was the first, African American self-made millionaire. So I'll read you the top. Madam C.J. Walker was an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and social activist, and was one of the first American women to become a self-made millionaire. But when she was 14, and now we'll show a picture of Lola, she was Sarah Breedlove, and she was a bride. So that's how oops, there she is. That's how her story started. And what we wanted was to show and remind people that no matter what somebody accomplished in life, they started as a child. And Lola just literally embodied her spirit so beautifully that each picture of the person that we're profiling and each picture of the kids as those people were both beautiful and inspiring. I want to choose another one because it's one of my favorites. And, when you're a journalist, and I was a journalist for a long time, journalists think they know everything. We just do. So when I ran across anything that was the first time I had learned about it, I was really, really amazed. So, when you think you know everything about Jackie Robinson, like, oh, Jackie Robinson, I know the story. I know the man. I said, no, I didn't know everything. So I'm going to take the screen just a second to show you Jackie Robinson as I read you a little bit about, oh, you know what? I have Duke Ellington. Hold on one second. Let me get Jackie Robinson. Um, some of these are sports stars. Some of these are musical stars, but all of them did something that was so amazing that we thought that it was necessary to give you a little bit of them. Thank you right there. And I'm going to go back to share the screen so that you can see this one. And then I'll tell you what I did not know about Jackie Robinson. Jackie Roosevelt Robinson would grow up to be the first African American to play Major League Baseball in the modern era. But when Jackie was a 16-year-old high school student, he was a member of a gang. That's the beginning of one of the most profound stories in American civil rights history, in American sports history, and in the annals of events that changed how we live. I never knew that about him, but there was so much about his story that was amazing. And for any kid who's trying to decide between a path that could lead them one way or a path that could lead to a dark way, I thought it was important for them to know that. I can tell you that another favorite one of mine, and I loved all of them, quite frankly, and some of them because of the way the kids looked, and some of them because of the impact that these folks had on our lives. Um, when we asked Caleb to sit down and do this person, quite frankly, we were shocked. And it was about Edward Kennedy Duke Ellington. Oops. Let me get him. Share screen. There we are. Edward Kennedy Duke Ellington would grow up to be one of the most celebrated musicians and composers in history. He is considered one of the founding fathers of American jazz. But when Edward was 15 years old, he was serving sodas at the counter at the Poodle Dog Cafe and writing his first composition called Soda Fountain Rag. and he did it before learning to read or write music. There was so much about that beginning of that path that he was on that was just amazing to me that I wanted children to know. First of all, he was only 15 when he wrote his first composition. He was serving sodas at a counter, literally nothing having to do with music or who he would become. And he did it before he learned to read or write music. So this is someone who literally changed the trajectory of their lives. And when we talked to Caleb about his story and showed him this photograph, and we said, now we want you to sit and think about that. And he sat right down and took this photograph. And Christy and I kind of hunched each other and said, oh my God, look, which we do every now and again when the kids would do something pretty amazing. Um, I think a part of why this book was important to both of us was because she has kids that she's raising now. Lola is growing into a beautiful, beautiful young woman, and I think she's 9 now, but she has a little sister, Eden. And my grandson, Caleb, who is 10 and going to be 11, quite frankly, is growing up before my eyes. And they're growing up, all of our kids, in a world that we don't have a lot of control over right now. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to how they see themselves and how they think about themselves, and to know that there will never be a time where they cannot do something really important or make history. I want to read one more to you, and then I just want us to take some questions and talk about the book and talk about history, because I'm on a huge campaign to quite frankly, change the way we teach children history. I want us to teach Black history as American history, not as a separate history that we celebrate, in February as a part of Black History Month. And I also want to make sure that we're paying attention to the trauma that our children are going through so that we boost their self-esteem every chance we get. I don't know that we have this photograph queued up, but the other one that really got to us was when we asked Caleb to become Martin Luther King Jr. Now, mind you, he of course knew who that was and was ready for that, but we weren't ready for him when he did this. And if we don't have it, you might have to just get the book to see it. Um, oh, nope, you're in luck. I do have it right here. So I'm going to um, share the screen one more time so that you can see this one. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would grow up to be one of the greatest civil rights leaders in American history, a man who preached against violence and for equal opportunity for all. But when he was 12 years old, he tried to kill himself. It was 1941, and young Martin was living in a middle-class Atlanta home with his siblings and parents, the Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. The home was filled with Bible readings and gospel songs, but the family lived in a city where Black children learned early the hard lessons of bigotry. He snuck out to go to a parade, and while he was gone, his beloved grandmother died. And when he found out about it, he jumped out of a window. Of course, he survived, and thank God for that, because he grew up to become the leader that we needed at the time, and has taught us to be the leaders that each of us need to be in these times. But when Caleb grabbed the podium wearing a wedding band and looked up to the heavens, we thought, oh my God. So that was what this whole process was like, in teaching these kids about these folks who are so important. And that's what we hope this book will lead to as we get it into libraries and into children's hands and into the hands of grandparents and parents who, quite frankly, need it. They need to be reminded. They need to be reminded, whether they're young African American children or whether they're young children of any race, that African American people have always achieved, have always succeeded. So for young children who aren't African American, it shows that there really is an equality that has always existed in this country that we haven't always recognized. And for young African American children, it reminds them that you can be anything. So I too want to reach out and thank the mayor for being here. That's so awesome. And I want to take questions. All you have to do is just unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat if you'd rather we read it. And I'm happy to talk about any aspect of this or about any aspect of the times that we're living in. I also have the burden in case anybody still had a question about something from the previous book. But I'm thrilled to present That They Lived, because this is sort of a life lesson from my friend Christy and me to kids everywhere. Do you have any images of the children without the makeup and costumes? Well, I keep a picture of Caleb on my phone in case you want to see what he looks like with my dog Desi, who is 17 years old and huffing in the background. Now, let me just share the screen. I've never done this before, but let's just see if we can do this. Um, oh, actually, this picture, well, I'm gonna email this picture to Eugenia, because I know how I can do it. I'll just go back to my screen and I'll hold it up so you can see it. Let me turn it that way. That's Caleb with my 17-year-old dog. Oops. With my 17-year-old dog, Desi. And Lola, I do not have pictures of, but she is beautiful, and you can get a sense of her face. It's not like there was so much makeup that you can't see her, but because of the character and because of what she's doing with just this amazing, again, if you tell them the story, this is what this person was doing and what they thought about, and she did that. And that was from Andrea B. Are there any other questions? Well, then I'd like to read a couple of more, because another one of my favorites is someone that I got to cover as a journalist when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and that was Muhammad Ali, who grew up as Cassius Clay. Muhammad Ali would grow up to be one of the greatest athletes in history, a man admired for his fight for political freedom as much for his boxing. But before he was known as the greatest, he was a 12-year-old boy named Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, and he was the victim of a crime. Someone stole his bicycle. It was October 1954. And people sort of know the story of him being so mad that he wanted to find this person who stole his bike and whoop him. And somebody said, well, you better go and learn how to do that. So go down to the boxing gym in the building he just left. And he met the officer who was running that gym and told him what happened. He said, well, if you think you're going to do that, you better learn how to fight. And he introduced him to boxing. And at that time, he was Cassius. Cassius knew that would be his life. He trained before school, after school, late into the night. Just 6 years later, he won a gold medal at the Olympics, and he went on to heavyweight fame. Um, oh, this is from someone named Trust, and it says, thank you for sharing about your book. One day I want to be an author as well. I have to log off now for my meeting. I am in the first grade. Oh my God, where are you? Thank you for being here. Oh, that's awesome. First grader. And then Kathy said, thank you. She's going to get books for her library and for her granddaughters. I really, really hope that this is the kind of story that you'll share. Oh, there's Trust. Hi, sweetie. How are you? Can you unmute? Tell your mom to unmute just so I can talk to you before you go back to school. There you are. Hi. How are you? It's very nice to see you. Are you there? There you are. So, are you doing okay? Oh, you're muted again. Okay. Well, I'm so glad you were here, because you're exactly the audience that we wrote this book for. We're hoping lots of young people like you will read it. You are beautiful, and I'm so glad that you took a minute. Oh, there you are again. Yay. Hi. So what made you decide to know something about the book?
Hi.
Hi.
It was really good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I'm so glad that you were here, and thank you for coming to see it.
I have to go to class now.
Okay, I'm gonna go to class.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye. Well, that has made my day. Andrea asked, how did you learn these interesting facts about these people? Well, Andrea, I was a journalist. I'm always a journalist. Once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist. But I was a journalist for many, many years before I took my current job in arts and culture. And these were simply reporting jobs. You literally start with, what do you want to know? And my dining room became a library, because rather than just, look for articles online and try to remember what I already knew. I ordered books from Amazon on all of these different folks, in some cases 2 or 3 books. There were so many about Frederick Douglass that it was amazing. And I read through them to try and learn every little bit I could about their early lives. Lots of us know about what they became, Harriet Tubman, and taking the enslaved to freedom, and Madam C.J. Walker becoming rich, but I wanted to know what they were doing when they were younger. So it took a little bit more research, but that's where I got it. And that is why I'm always thankful that I was a reporter before I was a columnist, before anything else that I do, because those lessons will always stay with me.
Rochelle?
Yes,
How are you?
hello, Mr. Mayor, how are you?
Good, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Many years ago, I was a teacher at Southfield High School, journalism teacher. And one of the things that I thought was missing with the kids that live in Southfield is they're in a good school district. They're honestly, some of the cars in the parking lot that the kids drove were better than my own car. Many of the kids were afforded a very comfortable life, a good home, and I think there was young people take things for granted when they don't know the struggles of people who came before them. I also think that the fact that you're talking about their early life, that's relatable to children, is very, very important, because they can hear about some adult, and but relating to the age is very important. So I just want to commend you for doing this book. I would agree with you. It's very, very needed. So thank you.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. I know that for me, I did not have a journalist role model when I decided to be a journalist. So I'll tell you my own story. I grew up in a little town in eastern North Carolina called Tarboro. There were 10,000 people there when I was growing up. There are 10,000 people there now. And the only reason I knew about journalism was since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a writer, and I kept trying to figure out how to make money doing it, because it didn't even dawn on me to write a book, even though I was in the library every day reading books. But when I was 16, the one English teacher, we had 2 English teachers, one for the advanced class and then another one that taught literature, and I had them both. And this teacher named Jean Harris decided, you know what, I'm going to make sure that we get a journalism class, just because she liked journalism. She went to the principal and said yes, and I'll never forget holding this green book, News Writing 101, that anybody who was interested in taking that class could take it, as opposed to whatever else we might have been taking for our literature class. And I thought, oh, that's a career. I want to take that. And that literally was how I discovered the way that I could make a living as a writer. So I thank her. And that was my moment at 16. Everybody in my family was teachers, beloved teachers. Everybody expected you to be a teacher. Everybody knew that that was something you could do. And had it not been for that class, I probably would have still been writing, but I might have wound up being a teacher. But instead, from that moment, I knew that was my life and that would be my career. So it does make a difference. And I want to thank teachers everywhere, especially parents who are teaching now, like Trust Mom. I know that if this were, my daughters are grown up now, but if this were happening when my daughter was young and we were having what we were having, she would be in real trouble. My pandemic teaching would not have been enough for her, because I have no math skills and very little patience. And so I just feel for all of these parents who are doing what they're doing. But thank you for that. That is why I really want to get it into the schools and the libraries and get it into kids' hands, because I want them to feel that moment when it happens. I appreciate that. We've got something from Barry Silverman. Absolutely agree that Black parents, grandparents would want to reach for this book to educate their children. What can you say to motivate non-Black family would want to do likewise? I'm so glad you asked that, because as I said earlier, this is a book for everyone. A part of the struggle that we have in this country is this myth for centuries that African American people are not achievers, are not capable of things, are second class citizens, or inferior. It has never been farther from the truth. And every opportunity I have to show people that and to make people understand that, but not just that people excelled, but because they excelled over overwhelming circumstances. For instance, people know the story of Katherine Johnson because, quite frankly, she helped send people to the moon. And that movie Hidden Figures let people know that Neil Armstrong would not get on the rocket until the woman who was the human calculator made sure that what the computer said was right was right. She would have been celebrated had she not been African American. These are the types of stories that if young white children were taught these facts alongside everything else, no one would feel this sense of inferiority or superiority, but there would be this general appreciation on all sides of the things that people can do. And I want to read you a little bit of Katherine Johnson's because that's an amazing story that, again, nobody knew until she was in her 90s. Creola Catherine Coleman would grow up to be a brilliant mathematician whose work as a human computer helped NASA send a man into space. But that's not surprising since when Catherine was 10 years old, she was smart enough to begin high school when her friends were still in elementary classes. But there was no school past 8th grade for African American children in the segregated town called White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, where she and her family lived. So her parents, Joshua, a farmer, janitor, and handyman, and Joylette, a former teacher, moved the family to Institute, West Virginia, so Catherine and her siblings could attend class. So with those type of obstacles and all of that she had to face, this 10-year-old kid who was brilliant got her start, but she didn't get her due and didn't get, recognition until decades after she did these amazing things. So imagine what would happen if the kids in her class in that segregated school had known how smart she was and could have grown up beside someone like her. It's equally important for kids who are not African American to see these folks, to understand the things that they went through, to understand the things that they achieved. I think it brings us closer together and knocks down this wall that somehow we're different. I would get my hands on a copy of this book. How do I get this and hopefully get this book into our school? That's from Shelley. And I appreciate that. I can tell you right now that if you go to RochelleRiley.com, which is my website, it has every way that you can buy this from independent bookstores, from Amazon, and directly from Wayne State. Barnes and Noble has it. You can get it everywhere books are sold. And even though I really, really, really love Amazon and buy something from them every day, gosh darn it, I hope that you'll find an independent bookstore and help them stay open and alive during the pandemic and get it from them. But if you'd like to get a bulk grouping of books, you can go to Wayne State University Press themselves, and they will give you a discount. So I'm hoping that a lot of folks who want this in libraries or want it for an entire class will do that. Thank you for that. Thank you, Shelley.
Rochelle, do you mind if I jump in for a moment? It's a perfect segue that Wayne State University Press was incredibly generous and has donated 2 copies of the book to people that are participating today. And so I put everybody's name into a random name generator, and I'm proud to say that the 2 winners today are Sarah Alforts and Jeanette Eisenhower. Yay. If both of you could send me a direct message with your address, it will be a signed book copy that'll be mailed directly to your house. It'll be delivered in a very safe, COVID safe manner.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll have to thank my publisher. And Dr. Timor has to leave, running off to a meeting, but is going to order the book today. I appreciate that. And if we can find out who Trust was and who her mom was, I'd like to make sure she gets a copy of the book for checking in today. We'll see if we can't do that.
Yeah.
That's so great. While you guys are looking for questions you might want to ask, I do want to explore a little bit more the question that we got from Mr. Silverman. When Dr. Martin Luther King was arrested for civil rights violations, for violating the fight to get his civil rights, he was jailed in Birmingham, and he wrote Letter from a Birmingham Jail, and I won't try to quote it directly, although in the past I might have been able to, where he talked about how this battle would not be won without the true support of allies, and how disappointed he was in the white progressive allies who spoke publicly about the need for this, but did not do as much as he thought they should to help the battle. I think the biggest thing that could happen to make things better is for white Americans, whether they're teachers or parents or politicians or leaders who are leaders without necessarily being politicians, to really understand how this is a battle we can win if we all step in and help. That means we have to change the way that we look at each other. We have to change the way that we embrace each other. And we have to not just, what kills me all the time is hearing this phrase, post-racial America, like that's a good thing. That's a horrible thing. What you're doing is asking an entire group of people to ignore their race or put aside their race or hide their race so that we can have a comfortable coexistence. What I want is for people to embrace our differences, embrace our cultures. We have people who do that now. I watched Michael Phelps get ready for his Olympic swim that he would break a record, and he was listening to Lil Wayne. And while I don't listen to Lil Wayne, I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? So I think that we do tend to embrace culture when we want to. We just don't embrace it all the time. Thank you so much. Jeanette is saying thank you too for the book. Are there other questions? I just want to take a quick look. I'm looking at when you see me leaning over like this, I'm looking at the chat just to make sure I don't miss anything.
Rochelle,
Yes.
I don't know if Mayor Siver remembers this because he was with the Southfield schools, but back when my kids were like in elementary school and middle school, and judging from my complexion, you can tell that in Southfield they were amongst African American classmates, and it was wonderful for them. They really feel like that's helped them in life. But one thing that they did, and when I saw your book, it really brought back memories, was that the teachers would have kids dress up in their favorite characters. My daughter was Harriet Tubman, which was kind of my favorite character. She was Harriet Tubman, and my son actually managed to dress up as Muhammad Ali. And then at the middle school, they put on a living museum where the kids would dress up as a favorite character, and we'd go around and they would be that character. So your book, I think, is spot on. Kids love dress up, and this is a wonderful way. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As a matter of fact, the New York Times bestselling author Alice Randall, who just did the book Black Bottom Saints and was here in town, the mayor interviewed her for our Black History Month kickoff that the city did. She's coming back at the end of the month, the end of Black History Month, and she and I are going to appear together, her talking about Black Bottom Saints, which is about all of these amazing people who lived and worked in Black Bottom, which was a real place before it was paved over for Interstate 75. She and I are both going to talk about our books, and we're going to ask parents to let their kids dress up as characters from Black Bottom Saints, and from that they lived, so that they have a sense of what that's like. And then we're going to show some of those pictures during that presentation. So look out for an announcement. We're going to be sending an announcement to every library so they can post it all over the region, so everybody knows they can do that. And we just want people to get a sense and learn about that character that they're doing. So that you're right. That was such a great way to get people to understand what kids feel, and to get the kids to really embody someone they were learning about, to become that person instead of just reading about them in a book. Thank you for sharing that, Barbara.
And Barbara, I do remember attending the Levy Middle School Living History Museum. The kids were phenomenal.
Oh, I love that name, Living History Museum. We need to do that again. As a matter of fact, we need to do that again. I'm Director of Arts and Culture for the city. I can do that. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Mayor, for mentioning that. That's awesome. Living History Museum. Let me write that down. Well, I'm going to share one more. We've got just a few more minutes, and this is one of my favorites because Thurgood Marshall literally was one of those people who changed the way we live in America. Just an amazing person who grew out of an amazing boy. Let me see if I have his picture. Thurgood. I do. Awesome. Share screen. Okay. And I'll show you that one. Thurgood Marshall would grow up to be an American lawyer who did more for any other person to make life equal for African Americans. He argued more cases before the U.S. Supreme Court than any lawyer in American history. That's any lawyer of any race or age in American history. And he became the first African American to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. That stellar journey began when Thurgood was 14 years old, and his parents, William Canfield Marshall, a railroad porter, and Norma Erica Williams Marshall, a teacher, made him understand how to use the law to fight for what's right. His father took Thurgood and his brother to sit and watch court proceedings so they could learn about cases. Then they would discuss what they had seen. Thurgood later said that his father never told him to become a lawyer, but, quote, he turned me into one. He did it by teaching me to argue, by challenging my logic on every point, by making me prove every statement I made, end quote. So we literally got one of the greatest associate justice and then chief justice of the Supreme Court because his dad made him understand the law right in a courtroom. Can you imagine that being the field trip that day? I can remember many times when I would take my daughter when she was very little, like 2 or 3, and daycare always ended at 6, and it was $1 a minute if you were late. So I would go and pick her up and come back on deadline, and I had these amazing 5-minute babysitters in the newsroom where every now and again when I was on deadline, I'd just check and say, "Where is she?" And my friend Catalina would go, "She's under my desk," or somebody would say, "Oh, she's over here playing with some toys." The newsroom was her playground. And I'll never forget one day she was sitting up at someone's desk at a chair, and she was holding, this was back, when we didn't use cell phones all the time, we would actually use the landline. She was holding a landline phone like this and pretending to type on the computer like she was typing a story. And I said, God, I wish I had that video. But I love that she knew what journalism was and knew what I did and knew what the news was because of that. And I love that Thurgood Marshall's father, a railroad porter, literally, that was their entertainment. They would go and watch court proceedings so he would understand the law, and he became one of the greatest lawyers of all time. So we have time for one last question. We're up to, 5 minutes left.
I just wanted to say thank you, Rochelle, for coming and having us be one of your first stops on the virtual tour. I was so excited when I saw the book almost a year ago, but just looking at your bookcase in the background, I'm reminded of on Sundays, my uncle would be in the kitchen cooking Sunday dinner, and we would be restless in the living room. And my grandmother would say, "Go downstairs and get a book." And on the book, the makeshift bookcase downstairs, there were a 25-cent copy of Malcolm X or in other books that she kept in her makeshift library. So to keep us from being restless and bored, she would tell us to go get a book, and she would either have us read to her or she would read to us Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni. And we also had copies of the Ebony encyclopedias.
Oh, well, we had World Book Encyclopedia.
Yeah, we had the Ebony,
yeah. And World Book, yes.
So we had the whole collection. So I think I still have a copy, but I believe this book would be right there on that bookshelf. It's just an amazing addition. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for that. And I can tell you, even if Christy doesn't want to do another one, she has given me leave to do more with other photographers. So I may just do this national call for kids to send in their photos and use the photos of different children to do another book, because there's so much history that we need to catch up on and learn. Is the reason for the book in the excerpt of the book? Oh, Kathy, that's such a good question. And you know what? I will read you a little bit of the intro before we go, just so you'll know that, because it's great. There was a note from the authors that you'll see at the beginning of the book, and it says, America has become enthralled with hidden figures in its history. African Americans whose contributions were ignored because of racism and discrimination. This book honors the prominent African Americans who are known, whose stories are shared during Black History Month, but who, despite their accomplishments, still are not treated with the respect and adulation they deserve as part of a continuing American history. Their story should be told every month, all year. And Christy, literally in explaining why she did the picture, said, one afternoon in January, My daughter Lola, who was 5 at the time, came home from school and told my husband and me about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She had watched a video about him in honor of the upcoming King Jr. Day. I was surprised at how well she seemed to grasp concepts such as segregation and the dream that Dr. King had. It got me thinking, and with Black History Month right around the corner, I decided it was an opportune time to begin teaching her about some of the women who paved the way for so many. And so she used Lola's love of playing dress up as a teaching tool and dressed her up for those pictures, which was just stunning. And some of the things that happened because of those pictures, they made the front page of the Seattle Times, and the photos began to go viral on social media and were mentioned on CNN and in People magazine. And with all of the attention came commendations from influential people. Senator Kamala Harris and Cornell Brooks, then president of the NAACP, sent notes, and they also got praise from people that they used in their photos, like Dr. Mae Jemison, the first Black woman to travel into space. And my friend Alelia Bundles enjoyed the tribute to her great-great-grandmother, Madam C.J. Walker, so much that she sent Lola a care package with books and memorabilia about her. So that was what happened with her. And for mine is quite simply because of who I am. I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist since I was 8 years old. I've worked at newspapers across the country, writing about education, politics, culture, and children. I was a newspaper columnist for most of that time and offered an opinion on everything from global affairs to school lunches. But I'm also a social mediologist. I spend hours each week on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, not only because it is necessary to keep up with news and popular culture, but also because the World Wide Web is an amazing playground. It makes it easier to study social trends and keep my finger on the pulse of American readers. So in February 2015, when photos began showing up on Facebook of a tiny face carrying the beauty and grace of famous African-American women, I was immediately smitten. And that was, I told you the rest of the story, that I then went in search of Lola and Christy. So my son is a teacher and he would love to share this with his class. That's awesome. And Jessica said that that would be a wonderful sequel. Oh, I guess telling the story of how the book came about, but it's in the book. But I do love talking about it, Jessica, and I am working on a sequel to The Burden. The Burden was literally about African Americans and the enduring impact of slavery and how those things that happened because of those centuries of enslavement still play a role. And I went around to 80 different conversations around the country talking about the burden. And I'm working on a sequel called Laying the Burden Down, because we're at a point in this country because of the death of George Floyd and people really reaching out and wanting to change things, that we might actually be at a point where we could change things and lay that burden down.
Well, thank you so much. I also want to point out we have a second local dignitary here that's been a part of this conversation. Dr. Cheryl Mitchell is the city administrator in Lathrop Village. So thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for
Thank you,
joining
Dr.
us.
Mitchell. Oh, wait, before you sign off, I want to say that Jessica said she was referring to a sequel to the book with an open call for photos. I think you're absolutely right.
Thank you, and I thoroughly enjoyed this and was glad I was able to participate. Good to see you, Rochelle.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. And you look fabulous. I love your hair.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Rochelle from the Southfield Public Library. We look forward to having you back again in person, hopefully next time once this has done. But thank you for being your first Zoom program here.
Hey.
I'm so happy you went successful. If you want a copy of The Burden or any, and we have copies of that They Lived on order. We don't have them into the library yet, but we will certainly be adding it into the library's collection. You can always give us a call. We'll put any books on hold, and we have them in the safe pandemic drive-up window for you to pick up.
Well, I'm certainly hoping to be there, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. You know, I listen to that Earth, Wind, and Fire song, September, all the time, and I dance to it at least twice a week. And I'm hoping that by September, we'll be out and about and wherever we want, and I can't wait to come back to one of my favorite libraries. And if you want any other information, including the book tour and where I'll be, this virtual tour, I'll be sitting here in my dining room with the same books behind me, but it has the schedule of all the appearances that are coming up. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.